Hello, I'm Brigantia, Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Thursday. Let's talk about an Imbolc Tea Ritual. Now, ordinarily for the Sabbats, when I make these videos about what rituals we might want to try to incorporate into our routine, I'll toss out multiple ideas, different kinds of possibilities, some of them clearly designed for solitaries, others for a more familial celebration, and other ideas for a much large communal gathering, especially if someone's lucky enough to have a coven or is establishing one. But so many of us do practice in solitude. So this time, for this specific Sabbat, I wanted to focus in on that reality. Imbolc is one of the few Sabbats in which I'm not really bothered by being on my own. Something about this time of year has always felt a little bit more private to me, and when I set up for ritual, it's just me and the gods, and I feel very content. I feel like I have this oasis of peace, and it's essentially how I want things to be. And this year, I want to honor that sense of quiet and that sense of intimacy. And hopefully, by sharing, my own ideas of what I'm planning to do this year, it'll be helpful to other solitary practitioners. So, a tea ritual. What we will need is, of course, our usual altar tools because we'll still want to be setting up our altar. We'll also need a place to set up our tea service, with the teapot and the sugar and the creamer and the cups and so on. Or if you're doing something simpler, a place to put your mugs and your plates. Also a place to sit down. I have a nice floor cushion, so I'm probably going to set up my tea service in a tray in front of me. Another thing that you'll probably want to do is to have something physical to mark out the circle around you where you have your altar and where you are setting up your tea service. And this could be anything. I'm planning on using my crystals because I have enough collection of smaller crystals that I think I can make a decent sized circle. But you could use florals or you could use river rock. I mean, just whatever you happen to have on hand that feels appropriate. It could even be something as simple as a ribbon. And if that's what you've got, that's what you've got. It doesn't have to be something fancy. Just, make sure that you do have that physical representation of the circle. Then, of course, you'll need your tea, whether it's in a pot or in a mug. And also, I would suggest having some kind of snack. Scones, those little tea sandwiches, bite-sized desserts. It's up to you. Just have food as well as drink because you're also going to be using these for offerings as well as the ritual itself. So, we're going to begin our ritual. So what you'll do is you'll cast your circle as normal. You'll call the quarters, invite the gods, your guides, any ancestors that you want to bring into the circle. And then you sit down after you go through these formalities and you pour your tea. So what happens after that? I come up with several different ideas, one of which is you can just essentially conduct a conversation. You can talk directly to your gods. After make sure you pour their tea as well. Make sure you're being hospitable before you start talking about what's going on with you. But also because it's Imbolc, talk about what you feel the need to be purified of things that you've been working on, whether it's correcting character flaws or whether you have specific goals that you've been working towards that you've just kind of been slogging along, and just talk about things of that. And or you could just simply talk about your love and affection for the deities you've invited into the circle, a praise for what they're doing, especially if they're deities who are associated with seasonal changes, like the goddess Bridget, about just moving the wheel forward, bringing the world closer to the return of spring and the resurgence of life. So often I feel like when we communicate with our deities, it's just us and our trials and our tribulations. And I don't want to say that we can't bring our concerns to our gods, but at the same time, how often do we just praise them? How often do we thank them? How often is the conversation about them instead of just about, us and what's going on in our immediate circle? Just something to think about, especially as we're planning rituals for special occasions. Another thing that can be done is meditation. There are lots of traditional forms of meditation. You could also, if you had some kind of device, your tablet or whatever, you could play a guided meditation because there are a lot of Imbolc specific meditations on YouTube and other platforms that you can have it ready to go, push play, and then just spend that time in meditation. If you have a good voice, you could sing songs or you could play music. One of my favorite songs for Imbolc is Bridget's Song by Celia. It's available on YouTube. I use it every single year in my Imbolc ritual. This could also be a time when you are doing spells. Ideally, you would be using spells that also involve the ingredients of your tea and your snacks. So, when you are planning your menu, make sure to kind of tailor that around your intentions and what you're hoping to achieve. If at all possible. If it isn't, oh well. But if you are intending to do spell work, it does make sense to have as much as what's in of the components involved in that spell already incorporated into your ritual. Part of this is to keep things a little bit more simplified, and the other part of it is just why waste the energy? You have this available in your tea and in your food. Why not make use of it? Another possibility during the tea ritual is to spend this time journaling. Um, in fact, you might actually decide to break out a brand new journal and essentially make this to be your letters to the gods. Not quite a book of prayer in the way that monotheistic religions would think of the concept, but just writing things down, talking to them correctly. Dear Bridget, dear Odin, dear Freya, dear whoever you are happen to be talking to, just writing down what you want to say to them. And this could be especially useful if you're needing to conduct your ritual perhaps a little bit more circumspectly, or if you just find that it's easier for you to write things down than it is easier for you to say them. Work with your own natural instincts here. But not only is this a way to pour out your heart to them, but it's also a way of tracking how your relationship with these deities evolved. Because in addition to writing these letters, you could also include notes of thanks when you feel that they have involved themselves in a situation you're dealing with, and it had a good outcome. You can thank them for that. You can thank them for the lessons, even if those lessons weren't very fun for you to learn. Um, and also, as you go through and as you review past passages, you can start to see the way you've learned to detect when the gods are actually interacting with you and affecting your situation, and that can be very faith strengthening. So, after you essentially have your tea and whatever activities you are involving with that tea party, then you can make your offerings, both of the tea and of the snacks that you brought, specifically to the gods. And also for later on, you might want to have a wildlife friendly offering to put outside after your ritual. And if so, be sure to have that particular offering with you in circle and state its purpose while you are communing with the gods, just so it's fully known about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and so forth. Then, after that's done, release your circle, farewell to the quarters, the gods, your guides, ancestors, and then you tidy up. Make sure that you have your offerings on the altar, and then if it's the offering for wildlife, make sure that you take that outside pretty directly. So, other activities we might do if we're going to be on our own, if we have the opportunity and time to do them, of course. One thing that I thought, in spite of the fact that the weather of February is dubious at best, but if it's all right, if it's not too cold or too windy or anything else, one thing we might do is to take a nice walk outside. And total bonus points if we find a natural area like by the lake or forest or whatever we happen to have nearby to us. If we can be outside, it's much easier to connect, even if we're not actually performing our ritual outside. Which, if you have the weather for it, I mean, by all means. I mean, certainly where I live, if it's nice and warm enough on An Imbolc to actually have my ritual outside, that is an occasion, and I will certainly be making the most of that because, in all probability, the next day it will be bitterly cold. So, use the advantages that come to you. But the nice thing about also taking these walks outside is that I do like to do this before I perform a formal ritual. It clears my head, helps me focus, it just makes everything clear, and I feel more centered and balanced. Alternatively, if you take a walk after your ritual, it can help you reground. There's always a lot of excess energy built up, and sometimes it takes a little while to let the excess kind of slide out of our systems. And to go in for a nice walk outside, that's one method of doing that. Also, depending on what we're hoping to grow in our gardens and where we live, and because of course different areas require different planting times, so you want to start your seeds at the appropriate moment. But if this is going to be the right moment for you, you might want to start some of your seeds. Keep them inside where it's nice, cozy, and warm in a nice sunny spot. But this way they can start growing, and then they'll be ready to put in the ground when the weather permits it in the spring. And a third thing we might do is to just start making our to-do list for spring cleaning, gardening, our other personal projects. After the hibernation of January, it's time to wake ourselves up and get moving. And of course, if we have made certain resolutions for the new calendar year, I think we've had enough time to kind of experiment and have an idea of what's going to help us reach those goals, what's not, and it's time to really buckle down, get serious, and get moving, because spring will be here before we know it. And with that spring, there's going to be a lot to do, both magically and mundanely, and we need to make sure that we are getting ourselves in gear. So it's not quite 0 to 60, but it is perhaps 0 to, 45. So we're starting to get into motion, and that's part of what Imbolc is about. It's about helping turn that wheel, not only for nature itself, not only cooperating with the gods when they are in motion and moving things along, but also turning the wheel for our own lives and our own personal benefit. So that's my idea. If you have your own solitary Imbolc ritual you would like to share, please come see me at Blackbird's Brew. There's a link to join in the description box below. In the meantime, of course, as always, please subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave a comment, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.